Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again for the 166th episode of the State of Freedom, where we are advancing rapidly, relentlessly the cause of constitutional conservatism on the front lines for Louisiana citizens fighting for justice, liberty, and truth. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. We are so grateful for you, and we're so honored that you would have us along for part of your day. We're only here, as you know, because of your encouragement, your friendship, your prayers, and your financial support. If you're looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd also really appreciate it if you'd help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us. Give us a 5-star review, subscribe to it, share it. And don't forget, we're also on YouTube and Rumble, and the links to those are in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us as well. We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. The DVD can be purchased from several popular retailers, and he's on tour screening and promoting the film. If you'd like to support General Flynn and the State of Freedom, visit freedomstate.us to get your copy of the DVD, to buy Flynn movie merchandise, or purchase tickets to a live screening. Our affiliate link is also in the show notes. Well, today we are coming to you again with a weekly recap and look at the week ahead with what's going on at the Louisiana State Legislature. But before we get into that, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Proverbs chapter 18, verse 15. And it says, "The spiritually hungry are always ready to learn more, for their hearts are eager to discover new truths." And you know, one sign of humility is taking the posture of a student in life. Just showing not just a willingness, but an eagerness to learn touches the heart of God. He wants us to come as little children, as teachable children who desire more from Him, who desire more of Him, and who want to better understand His ways and His heart. Let me encourage you today, take some moments of self-reflection with the Lord. And if your spiritual life has grown a little stale, open the Bible and ask Him to teach you something new today.
You know what, Danielle? It's hard to be it can be difficult to be a student for people because being a student presupposes that you don't know everything. And there are a lot of people out there who are convinced that they basically know everything, or at least anything that would be important for them to know. So to be a student, it requires a certain amount of humility and a certain amount of vulnerability that a lot of people don't possess. But there's great blessing in just sitting down and being a student and understanding on the most basic level that not only do we not know everything, we really don't know a whole lot. We know, we don't, my grandfather was a professor in college. He was a Greek immigrant. He came through Ellis Island at the age of 16 from the island of Cyprus in Greece. At the age of 16, and he ended up learning 7 languages. He was an English professor, brilliant teacher for about 40 years in Louisiana. And he still had that strong Greek accent. And I never knew my grandfather, but my dad used to tell us stories about him. He was my dad's dad. And he used to stand up in front of the classroom and he would write a big circle on the chalkboard. He would say, "This, my students, represents all of the knowledge in the universe." And then he would write a little dot right there in the middle of it. And he said, "And this little dot here represents what we know about it, half of which is false and half of which is highly suspect." Which basically means that we need to be humble because there's a whole lot more that we don't know than that we do know. And there's always more we can learn about different subjects and different topics. So, and there's certainly always more to learn about the deep, inexhaustible mysteries of Christ. So that's the
Yeah.
point.
I love it, Chris. I love it. And, I think it was the Apostle Paul said, we see in part and we know in part. And I think based on what you said, that's extremely generous of him.
Extremely generous, right? Exactly. But Danielle, I love the one of the Bible versions actually has Saint Paul saying that a different version of what you just said was, "Now we see through a glass darkly, but then we shall see him face to face." That
Yeah.
always moves me so much. He's talking about really the beatific vision. He's talking about the full vision of Jesus, in heaven. It's so powerful. And we will see him face to face. So,
Yeah. Can't imagine it, but looking forward to it.
so am I.
Well, I guess I can in a way imagine it, but I feel like, compared to what it will be like, it's my imagination, is limited.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that, I know we're getting a little off topic here, but well, as far as what we have to discuss tonight, but I have to ask you, do you think that some of the perceptions of Jesus and God, for that matter, God himself, Jesus, the Holy Trinity, but particularly the person of Jesus, do you think that some of the perceptions that have been built up about him over the centuries, the way he's portrayed, the way he's perceived, are a little bit troubling? I find some of them to be troubling.
I find some of them to be downright heretical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wonder whether or not abuses within religion, and I'm not saying religion itself, because I think that there is healthy religion and good religion, but I think sometimes the abuses of religion have sort of created a picture of God and a picture of Jesus that may not be fully accurate, and I think and really have gotten away from the simplicity, the real simplicity of who Jesus was. I guess is what I'm trying to. A lot of institutional barriers, it seems like, have been put between Jesus, the shepherd, and the sheep that he came to save, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah. What you were saying just now reminded me of two things, if I can recall them accurately, from a prophet that I listened to a lot named Bobby Connor. And one of them, he says, he said that the Lord told him, Bobby, people are way too familiar with a God they barely know, way too casual, way too comfortable. And then the other one he said was, Bobby, people think I'm a lot easier to get along with than I actually am. That he,
Right.
that he's so permissive, and I think both of those are true. And that's probably, in a lot of ways, the more Protestant fault line, if I had to say it, the casual, Jesus is my homeboy kind of approach has kind of come to the Protestant side of things, just to be overly general. And I think probably to the Catholic side of things, it's God is unapproachable. You can never do enough. You can never say enough to be able to right all the wrongs and be able to sit with the Lord yourself, that there are these barriers. And so I think that we're really in a time, Chris, and obviously you and I are living through it right now to be having this discussion where all of that is kind of getting fleshed out. We're seeing people come to the Lord in powerful, really meaningful ways. People who you would never expect, like I saw just recently, this past week, I saw the podcast episode that Russell Brand did about his own conversion. And that was so powerful, considering where he came from. I mean, it would be powerful if he came from a perfect background, so to speak, but he came from a lot of heartbreak. He came from a lot of drug abuse and, wild living. And I think we're just going to continue to see more and more of that, people just being completely real. And that's really what we need. We need people to be real.
Oh
And
my
when
gosh,
people are
yeah.
real, then we'll be able to begin to scratch the surface of revival.
Yeah. And it is all about being real. It is all about opening ourselves with total sincerity, total vulnerability, total nakedness, really, before God in complete truth. He said, you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And, the truth is the truth is the truth. And a lot of people, I think, maybe they feel like they're living in the truth, either about their own lives, about the state of the world, or whatever, but they're not really living in the truth. And sometimes it's difficult to be able to face 100% the truth, both within ourselves and in the world, because it requires a lot of vulnerability to do that. But if we are able to do that, to really embrace the truth, it really does set us free. It really does set us free. And the last point I wanted to make on this, Danielle, is you're so right. The way you sort of made the dichotomy between, God being just so friendly and so permissive that there really is nothing that needs to be forgiven on the one extreme. And then on the other extreme is that my own background is that almost everything that you do is potentially you're culpable for, and it's almost impossible to ever be able to do enough to be able to get the grace and the salvation that you need, so, and those are the two extremes. So you're exactly right. And we want both to be able to be friends with Jesus and also understand that he expects our best and he expects us to follow his commandments. And when we fail, then we get back up, we seek forgiveness and move on. But I think that the middle ground there is kind of what I'm trying to strike.
Yeah, I agree. And, I guess that brings us full circle to the point of humility. Humility and seeking the truth is what's going to get us there.
Yep, 100%. And speaking of seeking the truth, there's about 30 items of truth that we're going to be getting through tonight, isn't there?
There is. And, Chris, I was thinking before the show, we can I'm really starting to feel, you can tell me if I don't want to speak for you. I'm starting to feel like things are pushing toward the end. You can kind of feel like we're pushing toward the end of this regular session. Now we've got less than 1 month of the regular session to go. And, there's not that many new bills being introduced. Things are just kind of moving along through the process now. And frankly, that's encouraging to me because we have seen a lot. We have been through a lot. We have been way over our eyeballs in legislation. So maybe just I'll take that opportunity to say that what we're going to run through today, just a note that this is a pretty good snapshot of the bills that we are following, have been following, that have moved or will move in the week ahead. But if we're not covering something, it could be for any number of reasons. One is that the author may have abandoned it because they don't have support for it. Another reason is that it is moving well and it's not projected to have any hangups, so we're not going to spend extra time on it. We may be prioritizing some bills over others based on the level of support they need. We could have missed it altogether. So if you're concerned that we have missed something important, please reach out to us and flag it for us. You can email us at chris@lacag.org, danielle@freedomstate.us. Chris, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's basically exactly what I was going to say. I would say more often than not, one of two scenarios is the case. Either the author has abandoned the bill, either because they don't have the support for it, or because there's another item of legislation that's better, that is moving, or, as you said, Danielle, because the legislation has substantial support, it is moving through. And of course, we'll cover all of it in the general wrap-up session episode when the session's over. All of it will be covered, from start to finish. Yeah. And of course, that will only be about a 4.5 hour session, maybe a 5 hour session at that point.
It may take an entire day.
Yes, that could be a 2 energy drink episode. We'll see.
There we go. All right. Well, let's kick things off with what happened this week. First up are two bills, HB 48 and 49, both by Representative Bacala, both proposed constitutional amendments related to appropriations and the budget, Chris. They both passed the House floor unanimously this week, and will head to the Senate now.
Yeah, and these are two very important bills, and one basically says that would require that the House always have at least 48 hours to consider appropriations bills, and for HB 49 would allow the House to vote to extend the legislative session if they're running up on time at the very end of it, in order to make sure that they have that 48 hours at the end in order to review appropriations legislation. And we just don't want the kind of chaos, the kind of debacle that we had last year, when they're running around like chickens with their head cut off, trying to read literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of appropriations amendments, and they don't have any time to do it. And I think that was probably by design. But both of these will create a more orderly appropriations process on the House floor. And I applaud Representative Debacles for bringing the bill.
Yep. Excited about those moving. Next up are two by Senator Presley, very different bills, though. The first one is Senate Bill 133. Y'all have been hearing a lot of episodes related to this by us. This is his bill that would say that, well, basically asserting Louisiana state sovereignty and saying that the WHO, UN, WEF, any of those international acronyms can't assert control over us, can't tell us what to do. Is that right, Chris?
That's exactly right. And basically, the World Health Organization, the UN, these organizations are not going to be dictating health policy in the state of Louisiana. I had a chance to testify in favor of this, Danielle, on the Senate side, and I was very, very happy and privileged to be able to do so. So we're going to have some protection right here in the state against what happened during COVID, which was just absolutely atrocious.
It was absolutely atrocious. And sorry for speaking over you. I was just going to add that people around the world are looking at Louisiana on this bill. So we've had probably 6, 7, 8 interviews with national voices who are speaking against the WHO treaty signature, treaty signing, which is scheduled currently for May 27th. This bill will go a long way to basically blaze the trail for other states in the U.S. and for nations around the world to say, we're not going to sit back and take this. We're not going to do what you say, WHO. And it passed House and Governmental Affairs this week pretty handily. And we expect a vote on this. The earliest we expect it, I believe you talked to Senator Presley, Chris, he said Wednesday or Thursday of this week at the earliest. It may get pushed to next week. So we're keeping an eye on this one.
And let me just add to this, Danielle, on SB 133. You're exactly right. Representative Presley said Wednesday or Thursday of this week, probably, maybe as late as next week, probably early next week. But I will say that in the connection to the WHO, I was very happy to see that the U.S. 49 U.S. senators sent a pretty scathing letter to President Biden 2 or 3 days ago, basically demanding that he reject this WHO agreement for any number of reasons stated in there. And one of the reasons was that the WHO is the last organization on the face of the earth that has earned any degree of respect or credibility when it comes to responding to any kind of a pandemic. They made so many mistakes. They screwed things up so badly. The last thing we're going to do is give them more power and more control. I have to give a shout out to Senator Ron Johnson, who is, I believe, was mentioned by several of our national guests as someone who's been pushing back against the WHO very hard in the U.S. Senate. So I just wanted to mention that letter that was signed by 49 or 50 U.S. senators to the WHO, saying that at this point, any WHO pandemic agreement between the WHO and President Biden is DOA in the U.S. Senate. Very, very gratified to read that.
That's so awesome. It's just proof positive, Chris, that grassroots activism works, that people will move if enough of their constituents call them or relentless in pursuit of letting them know that they're not going to stand for this. They're not going to take it. And guess what? You're not going to get elected again if you don't listen to us.
And I guarantee you that Dr. Meryl Nass had a lot to do with the Senate. She was all over this, and I hope she listens to this episode.
I know. She's so wonderful. I love, if people didn't catch it, she came on and also did a great little clip, and we have it as an audiogram on our YouTube. If there's anyone you want to send it to, please do. She talks about the bird flu is the next scam, and how she just gets into it from a medical perspective of why the bird flu is not a real threat to humans. I think that's a really important one, and it's less than a minute clip that you can send to people. So check it out on our YouTube or Rumble channels. I thought it was really powerful and a very easy to understand soundbite.
I saw a guy on the street the other day, Danielle, right down the corner of Steel Boulevard, and there was some dude down there trying to tell him about all the dangers of the bird flu. And all I heard the guy do was flip him the bird and say, "Hey, I got your bird. Get off my block." And walked away, and the guy obviously was not happy. But let me tell you, the guy who lives down the street from me was not having any of that bird flu stuff.
Well, I'm happy he wasn't. All right. Moving on from the bird flu, Senate Bill 276, Senator Presley's other bill that we've been following pretty closely, the one that creates the crime of coerced criminal abortion by means of fraud. That one has also passed House Criminal Justice. I think it's in a similar position to Senate Bill 133. They expect a vote probably late this week or early next.
Yes, and it's just very, very sick. We don't want, and we are going to criminalize anytime a spouse or a husband tries to secretly induce an abortion in their girlfriend or their wife. Needless to say, this is something that should be punished very severely. I don't see any problem or any issue with this getting through. But again, we're mentioning this legislation because it's so important, and it's bringing to the forefront an issue that just has got to be addressed. I'm so impressed with Senator Presley's sister who testified. I got to hear her testify in the House committee recently. She did such a great job. And Thomas was sitting right next to her. It's obvious that he's got great support for her, loves her, and feels very protective of her. And seeing them there together was very inspiring and gratifying to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, next up is another pretty serious bill, Senate Bill 306 by Senator Cathy. And this one increases the penalty for human trafficking involving sexual activity with minors.
Yeah.
And we've been super supportive of this one as well, Chris.
Very, very important. Up to life imprisonment if you are found guilty of sexually trafficking a minor under the age of 18. I don't know about you, Danielle, but I've heard a couple of people mention, and I don't know exactly why this is the case. Why do we not have more sex trafficking prosecutions in Louisiana? I wonder why that is. It's occurring. I mean, it's a massive industry at this point. It's so sad to hear. And I'm just wondering why we don't prosecute this crime more. Is it because it's hard to prove, or is it because we're just not paying attention to it? I don't know.
I don't know, but I hate to say it, but I think some people are looking the other way. I mean, I think people in places of authority must be looking the other way, because if you talk to, I'm a CASA here in Terrebonne, and if you talk to the people who run the organization, if you talk to ADAs, it's extremely prevalent. Sex trafficking is extremely prevalent, but I don't see that. And you know what, Chris? Maybe there are prosecutions that are happening, but it seems like it would be newsworthy, doesn't it?
Well, the mainstream media, it's amazing. If Trump, sneezes too loudly, they're going to report that and try to get him indicted. But other things they don't seem to think are important enough to report. Maybe this is one of them, but it's such a tragedy. And I'm very happy that Senator Cathy is bringing this legislation to enhance those penalties for people who are in fact convicted.
Yeah. And I might just make a plug right here. We the People Bayou community is going to be doing the next mixer that we have will be in the month of May. I need to double check the date because we changed it, but I think it's on May 15th. And the topic will be about human trafficking. Anyway, I'll put the details and the link if anyone is local and would want to attend or even travel to it. I'll put the link with the details in the show notes so anybody can join us. If you're able to, we'll probably make it a Facebook Live or something like that, make it available on YouTube if people want to check it out. But it should be really good.
Danielle, this is about child. It'll be a cover child trafficking as well.
I think it's both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe specific to child trafficking, actually.
Good.
But I've been a little out of the loop the last couple of days, so
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Not that you've been
really
out of the loop. I'm glad to hear that that's going to be what's being covered. Let me just clarify that.
It's okay. I'll get back in the loop.
Okay.
All right. Next up, Senate Bill 357 by Senator Seabaugh. And this one is one that we've been waiting for, Chris. He's been talking about this for a long time. He was very, very strong on this last session. And I'm glad he's finally being able to bring this bill. It is about ending a public health emergency and the legislative powers to do that.
Yes, and I'm so happy that if this bill passes, either house of the legislature, whichever house gets the petition passed to vacate an emergency health order in Louisiana, guess what they no longer are going to have to do as a prerequisite, Danielle, to being able to vacate that emergency health order? They're no longer going to have to go consult with the Louisiana Department of Health, which is the redheaded stepchild of the CDC and the WHO. So our legislature is no longer going to have to bother with the Louisiana Department of Health before they vote to cancel an emergency health order. I think this is very, very important, particularly in light of the very sketchy and questionable recent history of the LDH with regard to COVID and child vaccines and all the rest of it. I just assume that the legislature never have to consult with them again about anything.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you've met me, Chris. I would go further than that. I would be happy to see LDH completely dismantled, but we'll save that for another session.
Right.
All right.
Hey,
next up,
LDH, loser, don't holla. All right, let's go.
Senate Bill 419 by Senator Talbot. This is a big win for us, Chris. So proud of what happened with this bill. This is the bill that we were pretty salty about, very, very strong against, that would have basically created all kinds of restrictions on the Second Amendment, specifically concealed carry.
Yeah, and I told Kirk that this is absolutely antithetical to constitutional concealed carry, which we have been celebrating across the state now for weeks and weeks and weeks. You can't, on the one hand, say that we're codifying the fundamental constitutional right to permitless carry in Louisiana and then come pass legislation that carves out significant swaths of the state and events where you can't conceal carry. Either it is a fundamental right for law-abiding citizens or it's not. And in its original version, his bill basically gutted constitutional carry. So I called him and said, we have a lot of concerns about this, getting a lot of calls here, Kirk. And Kirk understood where we were coming from. And he ended up amending the bill to basically say all it does at this point is enhance the penalties for if you're carrying when you're drunk. And it enhances the penalties if you're carrying in a negligent way. But as far as restricting geographically where a law-abiding citizen can carry his gun, that's all gone from the bill, which is very, very good. Very good.
That's awesome.
I'm so happy that we and others were able to help protect and preserve this such an important right.
I'm so glad that you were able to speak with him on this and that he was very receptive and made the changes that would be in alignment with the Constitution. And frankly, Chris, it just struck me, and it probably would have been helpful if it had struck me 5 weeks ago, but I bet he was one of those members that raised their hand and said, I want to co-author SB1 during the criminal session. I want my name to be up there as someone who was not only voting for constitutional carry, but I felt so strongly about it. I wanted my name to be on the moniker as an author of that bill, as a co-author of that bill. I bet his name is up there. So I'm very happy to hear that he was willing to make the needed changes to protect the Second Amendment in the state.
Yeah, and you know what? Because you're right, and you can't you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't both support constitutional carry as a fundamental right and then support legislation that carves out major venues where you can't carry. And in the French Quarter, it doesn't make any sense. Absolutely incongruous. So I'm just very thankful. And by the way, I have to tell you, Senator Talbot was not only receptive, he was very gracious about it.
Awesome.
And I think he understands, that it would have been totally inconsistent with the Second Amendment.
Beautiful. Happy to hear that. Thank you, Senator Talbot. Appreciate you. All right. Next up is Senate Bill 98, and this is a bill I do not appreciate, and it is by Senator McMath. We all call it here the cockroach bill. This is the one that would criminalize the use of a handheld cell phone while operating a motor vehicle. It passed House Transportation 12-0.
And there's still a chance, Dan. You realize that there is still a chance on the House floor to kill this, right?
Yeah.
And
I hope someone is poised to kill it.
Yeah, we have to kill this on the House floor. The reason why it has gotten through this year is because they're posturing it as only a secondary offense, where you could be driving along, but if all you're doing is talking on the phone and doing nothing else wrong, then a police officer is not supposed to be able to stop you because it's a secondary offense. But as we've explained on another show, that's probably not how this is going to work out in practice. Police officers create pretexts to stop people and do what they want to do very often. This is not going to end well. This is not going to age well. And I'm just glad that we, for the second time here, I think the second time, are cautioning against passage of this bill and warning people about how it's going to play out practically. And it's going to play out where people are getting pulled over under pretextual stops and going before judges, being fined. Their insurance rates will go up. More money is going to be coming out of their pockets, going to the state of Louisiana. And it's just going to be a complete nightmare. Watch and see.
Well, Chris, maybe we've been barking up the wrong tree on this one. With the secondary offense kind of situation, maybe we should be seeing if there are any Democrats who want to help dismantle this, because if anyone has been vocal through the criminal session and beyond about mistreatment by police officers or misunderstanding between police officers and citizens, it has been the Democrats. They've been very vocal about those issues, and maybe they're the ones who need to stand up and stand for freedom and stand for what's right on this bill.
That's a great point. I think, minorities, African Americans could be particularly vulnerable to these type of pretext stops under this legislation. That's a great thought and a great idea. Maybe that is a tack going forward on the House floor.
Yeah. We can do some outreach tomorrow. All right. Well, next up, this was a debacle. This may be one of the biggest debacles of the entire session that we have seen so far. And it was House Bill 777 by Representative Dickerson. It's a simple bill that would get Louisiana out of the American Library Association, which is a truly Marxist organization, an organization that is promoting perversion and all kinds of inappropriate materials onto children. And it was killed in no less than the House Municipal and Parochial Affairs, one of my least favorite committees, a committee that should not even exist, in my view. It was killed 9-7, and there were Republicans who voted to kill this bill. They were Vincent Cox and Barbara Freiberg, who have been voting very, very regularly with the Democrats, and one Democrat, Pat Moore, who has been with us on a lot of social issues, joined the Republicans who supported this bill. There were 3 Republicans who were absent and they could have saved the bill because, like I said, it was 9-7. Kim Carver, Foy Gadberry, and Joe Stagney were all absent for this. I think, Chris, you said Kim Carver was presenting his bill in another committee.
Yes.
But this has been, there's been a lot of noise. There's been a lot of unhappiness about this. Why don't you, for our listeners, maybe regale us with some of the story of what went down? There were some live mics. There were lots of profanity in the library hearing.
Yes, and really, Danielle, this bill by Representative Kelly Hennessy Dickerson simply would have severed the financial relationship between the state of Louisiana, our tax money, and the American Library Association, whose head, by the way, Emily Drobinski, is a self-described Marxist lesbian bent on dismantling the traditional American family. She is an outspoken promoter of drag queen story hour for children. And she is one of the biggest proponents of placing smut, let's just call it what it is, in public school libraries for kids across the country. She's quoted as saying, everybody should be able to be free to read whatever they want to read, including children. And so this is the head of the organization to which this bill, HB 777, was directed, to sever the financial relationship. No more Louisiana tax dollars go into this organization. And you're exactly right, Danielle. Sadly, this bill failed 9-7 in the Parochial Affairs Committee, and it did so really because of weak Republicans. And, I'm not going to mince words on this at all. Barbara Freiberg, of course, she's never been with us. If we had a decent candidate to run against her, probably she wouldn't be there at this point. Then we have Vincent Cox, who, as you said, the new Republican from Jefferson Parish, who seems to be more and more consistently voting like a rhino or like a liberal Democrat. And, that's the way it seems to be on Vincent Cox. He's more and more coming up on our radar screen. I'm willing to give Kim Carver the benefit of the doubt if he was presenting a bill in another committee, but he should have been in this room for this vote. It was way, way too important. And you're exactly right, Danielle, there has been outrage on the part of many people. I had the chance to talk to Representative Dickerson for a while Friday. She said that the speaker on this, Speaker Philip de Villiers, Speaker of the House, has been inundated with calls of outrage over the way this bill failed and demanding that it be recommitted to another committee and passed out of committee and passed on the House floor. I mean, does it not outrage you, Danielle, that in a Republican-dominated legislature, there would be any controversy about whether or not we're going to join states like Georgia and Texas and Wyoming and other states like that have already severed their financial relationship with this Marxist organization seeking to poison our children? It enrages me. And
it's completely outrage.
Yeah.
It's completely outraging. And maybe I'll just mention two other things. One, a clarification. Barbara Freiberg did have a fantastic opponent during the primary, and that's Jenny Seals. I think she was one of the favorites during of our interviews with candidates. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it past the post because there were too many people in that primary race. But, who Barbara ultimately ran against in the runoff was just not a strong enough candidate, was not a fighter of a candidate to beat her. So here we are with Barbara.
Yeah, Jenny Seal was a fabulous candidate in the primary. She got 21 or 22% of the vote. She had a very respectable showing, an outstanding candidate. And in all likelihood, if the Democrat had not been in the primary, the quote unquote conservative Democrat, she would have gotten into the runoff. She would have beaten Barbara Freiberg in the runoff. Jenny Seal would have. I have very little doubt about that. But thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just a plug for a friend of the show, Nate Koning. He wrote a fabulous piece that I believe was in the Hayride about the debacle that was this bill, or the hearing of this bill in the House Municipal and Parochial Affairs. We will link to Nate's article for anybody who wants to read it, put it in the show notes, because it is a fantastic article and gives you a little window into some of the nonsense that happens at the legislature if you're not able to watch the hearings live. They can get pretty nasty.
Yes,
And they
they
can
get
be
pretty
honestly
nasty.
pretty unbearable to watch.
Pretty unbearable to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when the Republicans are up there trying to rationalize doing things that they know are not in the best interest of Louisiana citizens. But I got to tell you, Nate Koenig is an absolute beast. He is such I love having Nate on our team and our foxhole fighting with us. He's just such a energetic guy and such an inspiration.
Yeah. And a straight shooter, absolute straight shooter. He's
Indeed.
he's not cutting corners or trying to please people. He wants to see what's right happen. So thanks, Nate. Shout out to you, sir.
Nate do not play. Nate do not play.
And speaking of do not play, we have House Bill 408 by Representative Mandy Landry, the dumbest bill of the session, the voluntary do not sell list. It did not play well in committee. It failed in House Criminal Justice. All the Democrats voted in favor. All the Republicans voted against it, and Brian Fontenot was absent for it.
Yeah. So I'm glad. I'm so glad that this is dead. We had actually a pretty good time talking about this one night. The idea that people who are mentally unhinged are going to voluntarily go and politely request to be placed on a list, requesting that nobody ever sells a gun to them. I couldn't understand where this comes from. It was such a ridiculous bill, both conceptually and practically, how this would play out. It's gone, thank God. We were on record opposing it. But one thing that we can rest assured of and take a degree of consolation in, Danielle, is that we will probably be able to anticipate another stupid bill from Mandy Landry at some point in the not too distant future.
Well, Chris, you and I had talked about this bill offline, and you were saying, I don't really understand, I guess worst case, if it passed, it wouldn't be that bad because it's just kind of stupid and people aren't going to go and do this. And my point was, well, maybe people aren't going to go and sign themselves up. But once this happy little list is created and the little bureaucracy is created around it, then the next step is your neighbor can maybe put you on the voluntary do not sell list. And then it's not voluntary, then it's involuntary, and on and on and on. So this bill marks the killing of a slippery slope. So big shout out to House Criminal Justice, to all the people who voted against that. Thank you very much for seeing through that and seeing how ridiculous it was and what a huge threat it could potentially pose in the future.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I didn't even, and you know what? I had not thought about that. And I'm always sensitive to precedents being set. And I really didn't see that. I was thinking, well, this is voluntary. It's not going to work. It's a stupid bill. Let them pass it. But you're right. You were so right. There's a very, very fine line between a quote voluntary do not sell list and an involuntary do not sell list. And they're pretty close. They're actually a lot closer together and really only a matter of degree. So you're right. It was important that this bill failed.
And that's what we're here for, right? To be vigilant, because the steady creeping and taking away of our rights that's been happening year after year, month after month, we're here to stop that. We're here to stem the tide of that. And all of our listeners are doing the same. If you're participating in that calls to action, if you are calling your legislators and letting them know how you want them to vote, what you will and will not tolerate, you are part of stemming the tide of the slippery slopes, of the creep, of the federal overreach, of the state overreach, of the bureaucratic overreach. So pat yourself on the back and remain vigilant. We've got another month of this. And, after the legislature leaves session, who knows what else is going to happen?
Yeah.
I
And
feel like we can never rest.
we can never rest. And I'll tell you this, Danielle, we oppose a lot of bills, but only a few do we actually demean, like the cockroach bill, this bill here, do we actually demean? And this bill, HB 408, was absolutely worth demeaning and laughing at because it truly was. I think it might have been the stupidest piece of legislation that I've seen since I've been following legislative politics. And I've looked at a lot of bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another one in mind, but I won't bring it up for time's sake. So maybe we'll
Okay.
play that. We'll leave that as a teaser and we can talk about it later because I haven't followed where that one went.
Okay.
All right. Next up is another bill by Mandy Landry, HB 630. It was thankfully also killed. This was one of the abortion-related bills. It failed in the House Criminal Justice Committee in a party line vote, with Democrat Roy Adams voting with the Republicans in opposition to this bill. Chris, remind us what this bill would have done.
Yeah, this bill would have just said you can't criminally arrest and prosecute a mom who has had an abortion. It's deeply wrong, as we believe it is. As a matter of public policy, we don't criminally prosecute women who find themselves in that difficult situation. The problem with her bill is that that's already the law in Louisiana. That's already public policy in Louisiana. So there was no need for this bill. And I'm sure that, the committee members recognized, what are you doing? Well, this is already a policy here. We don't need this bill. Boom, gone, dead. So fortunately, so Mandy she has a habit of either bringing legislation that is massively unpopular, A, or B, massively ridiculous, impractical, and unworkable, or C, totally unnecessary. So
it's not a
take your
great
pick.
Track record.
No,
Yep.
A, B, or C.
Yep. And we'll get to another one of hers in the week ahead. But first, we've got a couple more bills to cover from this past week. Next up, House Bill 238 by Representative Michael Echols. This one would prohibit, or will prohibit, hopefully, the sale of agricultural land to our foreign adversaries. It passed in Senate Agricultural Committee, and it is headed to the Senate for a final vote. And that will be that, because I bet Governor Jeff Landry won't veto it like some other governor that we once had.
Yeah. Yep. I bet you Governor Landry won't veto it, and I bet you that this will pass through. Unlike last year, and you realize not only did Edwards veto it, we get back into the veto override session. Unfortunately, we didn't have the will to override his veto last year. We're not going to have to worry about overriding a veto this year. This is such a great piece of legislation and so important. We don't want these foreign enemies buying up our agricultural land, and they ought to be able to. And to be honest with you, if they own it now, we ought to negotiate something with them and make it to where they don't own it anymore. These are our sworn enemies that are bent on destroying our country and our state. It's just extraordinary that they would have ever been allowed to buy agricultural property in the state of Louisiana. That's what shocks me.
Well, I'll disagree with you on one point. I don't think we need to negotiate anything. This state hasn't had a problem with expropriation of land. We are trying to resolve that situation now through our carbon capture sequestration unitization bills with Rep. Guyman, and I think Danny McCormick's also doing some work on that. So I say, just take the land back from our foreign adversaries. You know what? You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And if you spend a lot of money and don't get it back because you happen to be a communist who hates us and wants us dead, then guess what? I'm going to be happy to take your property.
Well, you know what? It's hard to argue with that. So yeah, that's there we have it. But 238, Danielle, we're going to be watching very, very particularly closely to see if there are any Republicans who are either absent or vote against this particular legislation.
Yeah, because after this session, you and I have been discussing the need to start a website called isyourrepacami.com. And this would be one of the votes that tells you whether or not your representative is a communist.
All you have to do to find out everything you want to know is go to isyourrepacami.com.
I'm gonna have to buy that before this episode airs.
I'm serious, because if somebody hears this, they're going to go steal it from us. We can't let that happen.
All right. 2 bills up by Representative Amity. The first one, House Bill 866. This feels like deja vu, Chris. It was the big anti-discrimination bill, and it failed on the House floor in a 38-58 vote, which was extremely surprising because we discussed this afternoon. It passed out of committee with strong bipartisan support. But you told me, and you can go into more detail on this, that it failed because of the hospital lobby, and that's not surprising.
That's exactly correct. It failed because the bill would have said you cannot discriminate in any way, shape, or form at all ever again against any Louisiana citizen because they refuse or decline any medical health protocol or medical procedure or medical device. Well, the hospital lobby obviously doesn't like that very much. Big Pharma doesn't like that very much. Big Medicine doesn't like that very much because guess what? They don't make any money when there are significant swaths of the citizenry that are declining medical protocols and procedures because they don't want them. They don't make any money that way. They make money when people buy in hook, line, and sinker to their system, get their vaccines, get the medication they want, whatever protocols they want them to go through, and nobody ever questions it. Well, this bill flew directly in the face of that, and there was a great amount of pressure from the hospital lobby that was placed on it. And I think even lobby, if I'm not mistaken, potentially, because the bill would have allowed lawsuits against entities that discriminated against people. And lobby, anytime there's a lawsuit that's brought up, the possibility of a lawsuit, they oppose it, even if it's meritorious, even if it needs to be there. And so that's what happened on this bill. Danielle, and I'd like to know. I think our listeners have a right to know the 25 or so Republicans who voted against this bill. I think people have a right to know that.
I will tell you. I think there are 31, and I'm happy to list them all. The Republicans who voted against your rights and for medical discrimination are Larry Bagley, Bo Boyu, Stephanie Baralt, Ryan Boriak, Chad Boyer, Jacob Broad, DeWitt Carrier, Kim Carver, Vincent Cox, Paula Davis, Daryl Desatel, Jessica Domingue, my representative, Barbara Freiberg, Foy Gadberry, Troy Hebert, Stephanie Hilferty, Timothy Kerner, Jeremy Lacombe, Jacob Landry, Wayne McMahon, Dixon McMakin, your representative, Chris, Michael Mellerin, Candace Newell, Neil Reiser, Joe Stagney, Vincent St. Blanc, Polly Thomas, Francis Thompson, Christopher Turner, John Weibel, and Z. Zarang. I'll also mention that there were Republicans who were absent for the vote that could have protected you from discrimination, but did not show up, did not have the fortitude to take the vote, or maybe they had something else going on, but this was a pretty important one, and they are Chance Henry, Jack McFarland, Troy Romero, and Jeff Wiley.
Yeah, unfortunate, because this legislation was very, very important, and it was very simple. It was broad but not complicated, and just disappointed that this did not pass. But hats off to Beryl Amity, who continues to stand in the arena and fight so very hard for us.
Yep. And thankfully, people did vote to support her bill that would prohibit discrimination against students at school based on their vaccine status. So I guess people, pulled on the heartstrings with the kids, but they're not going to do it for everybody. That's House Bill 908, and it passed the House floor 66-36.
Yeah, you cannot discriminate against or treat any student any differently simply based on their vaccination status. In school, you have to treat all students the same. No discrimination in any way, shape, or form against any student because of his or her vaccination status. This is an important bill, and boy, I hope this gets through.
Yeah. I just wish that people could have been intellectually and logically consistent, because how do you vote against one and not the other?
Yeah.
How do you vote for one and not the other?
Yeah. And I will tell you, Danielle, that none of the reasons that have been given to me on 866 as to why people voted against it are convincing. None of them. I've read the bill. It's very straightforward. All it's saying is leave me alone. Let me make my own medical decisions, and don't harass me or discriminate against me based on decisions I make regarding my own health and that of my family. That's all the bill said. But guess what? That means less money for the medical cabal and for the pharmaceutical cabal and the hospital cabal for them. Because as I said a minute ago, when you're declining what they want you to do and becoming educated about it, guess what? They lose control and they lose money. And that's what this came down to.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/DWalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Well, we have made it to the week ahead, and it just occurred to me, Chris, one other reason that we may not mention bills that are coming up this week is just because they haven't been announced yet. So usually the Senate is a little bit later in publishing their committee hearing dates and what bills are going to be heard at those hearings. So if we have missed them, that could be a contributing factor. First up, on Monday, we'll get straight into House floor debate. So the first one is House Bill 627 by Representative Mandy Landry. We promised more from her. I know that you guys are excited to hear more from her. This is, Chris, I'm just going to let you talk about this one because it's about permitless concealed carry and where you can do it, where you can't do it. It's another carve-out attempt to weaken the Second Amendment.
Well, fortunately, relatively speaking, because of a lot of pressure regarding this bill, we're on record opposing it. We did a significant call to action on it. She did amend the bill in committee to allow you to conceal carry within the 1,000 feet of a parade route if you have a government-issued concealed carry permit. The original version of her bill didn't allow that. But a committee amendment did make that concession. But the bottom line is this is not good enough. Permitless carriers who are law-abiding should have the same rights as permitted concealed carriers. That's the common thread running through so much of this legislation are these illegal and arbitrary and unfair distinctions being made between permitted concealed carriers and permitless constitutional concealed carriers. And they're not fair, and we're going to call them out every time that occurs. And in this bill, just such a thing is occurring because of the distinction that she's making between concealed permit carriers and permitless carriers. That's why we oppose this bill, even as amended, and we're going to continue to oppose this bill because permitless carriers are constitutionally guaranteed to have the same rights as a person who has a government-issued permit. people who don't want to be on a government watch list or on a government database have the same fundamental rights to carry as those who apparently don't mind being on a government database or getting a government permit and permission from the government to conceal carry. So this bill makes that artificial distinction, and we're going to continue to oppose it to the bitter end.
We will. And maybe just a note that you may or may not know as a listener, when you go to the LACAG Action Center, go to lacag.org, up at the top, click on Action Center. Then if you go to the right-hand side, scroll down on the Action Center. This is on a desktop. It's a little bit different on your phone. On your phone, it's all the way at the bottom. But if you're on a desktop, it's on the right-hand side, and it says Legislative Scorecard or Scorecard. This is a bill that we are going to take note. Who on the House side votes in support of this, they will be scored accordingly. And every single member of the House is going to get an email Monday morning saying, look, if you vote for this, we are watching, and your score will be reflected on our scorecard. We will also let your constituents know. So we are taking note, and I would like, if you want to know where your representative stands, please, by all means, go and check out their scorecard. It is right there for you. I will say that there have been more nasty votes, I guess is a way to say it, on the House side than there have been on the Senate side. So we haven't scored as much on the Senate side yet. So your senator may not have much of a score, but I guarantee you your representative will.
Absolutely.
And as bills are now moving, in large part from the House to the Senate, we'll be doing more scoring on the Senate side as well. All right. Well, it bears mentioning, Chris, that this was heard in House Criminal Justice this past week, and it passed because 2 Republicans joined the Democrats, Vincent Cox and Brian Fontenot.
Yes, Vincent Cox and Brian Fontenot. And I was surprised, frankly, about, is it Brian or Byron?
Brian.
Well, okay, Brian Fontenot. I was very surprised that he voted against this, because just the week before he was railing against a House Bill 408, which would have created a gun-free zone in New Orleans, in most of New Orleans. So, and I was like, how do you go from arguing against that to voting in favor of this? I just didn't quite get it. But anyway, he and Vincent Cox, who, as I said earlier, is coming up on the radar screen an awful lot lately as someone who needs to be defeated. We need to find. Look, do you think it's premature to start looking for someone to run against Vincent Cox?
No, it's not. It's not. He's high on my list of people who have either not represented their constituents because he literally won't show up to vote, or when he shows up to vote, he is voting the wrong way pretty regularly. So not too impressed with his performance thus far. There's time to change, Vincent. There's time to change.
There's time to change, and it's time to, but you better start now.
Yeah. You got a lot of ground to make up. All right. Also, 2 more Second Amendment related bills. First one up is Senate Bill 152 by Senator Blake Miguez. This was a simple fix for a civil liability immunity for permitted concealed carriers. If everyone remembers, he brought this bill during the criminal session just a few short months ago. And Chris, you have been working behind the scenes to push an amendment on this that we really want to see happen.
Yeah, absolutely. SB 152 is going to amend a part of the concealed carry law liability provision that was passed in the criminal session. And we want them to add another amendment to SB 152, which gives permitless carriers the same liability protection as permitted carriers. Right now, in the state of Louisiana, and I'm sure maybe some permitless carriers don't know this yet, but unless you have a government-issued concealed carry permit, if you have to use your weapon to defend yourself or your family, you don't get the same enhanced protection from lawsuits and civil liability as someone who has a government issued permit gets. You may not know that because it's not exactly been very well advertised. So we are seeking an amendment in this bill, SB 152, that allows permitless carriers to have the same kind of liability protection as a permitted carrier if the permitless carrier takes a class, goes through the process from a duly certified firearms instructor, and can show that he has the training to handle his gun. Do I even think that should be required? No, I don't. I don't think that that should be required. I think the presumption should be in his favor, but we are where we are, and we're trying to keep permitless carriers off of a government database. That's really what we're trying to do. So we're trying to get an amendment that says, look, if they can show that they have gone and taken the class, done what they needed to do from a duly instructed firearms instructor, duly certified, then they get the same liability protection and they don't have to be on this government database with getting government permission. I think that's fair, Danielle.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, the other aspect of this is this would be a show of good faith from the legislature and, frankly, the governor that we don't believe as a state in two classes of concealed carriers in this state, that permitted concealed carriers or constitutional concealed carriers have the same rights in the state of Louisiana, and there are not, there's not favoritism between the two. Otherwise, what is the stinking point of constitutional carry?
Let's either stop creating arbitrary, illegal, unconstitutional distinctions between the constitutional carriers and the permitted carriers. Either let's stop doing that. Let's stop making those distinctions and eliminate the ones that have already been made, or let's stop celebrating the passage of SB1. But we can't do both.
Yeah,
we cannot do both.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. All right. Another Second Amendment bill. This one we really love, by Senator Miguez as well, SB 194. And Chris, this one requires that no local ordinance related to the Second Amendment may be more restrictive than state law. Break that down for us.
There very well could be local municipalities that try to pass laws like, let's say, Orleans Parish. The Orleans Parish Metro Council may try to pass a law that restricts the Second Amendment more so than is in state law. Well, this bill, SB 194, basically says that no local municipal laws regarding the Second Amendment can ever be more restrictive or more prohibitive than current state law. And Blake Miguez is right on top of this. And this is a way to protect handgun owners and concealed carriers from their own local governments, particularly if those governments happen to be in certain locales like Orleans Parish in the state of Louisiana. So it's a very good bill. And Danielle, I am pretty optimistic that this is going to get through.
Great. Awesome. All right. Next up, also Monday, House Bill 904. This is also going to be up for floor vote by Representative Emily Chenevier. This is, Chris, you testified on this bill earlier this week in House Education. It is about DEI reporting by all public schools, and it's kindergarten through post-secondary school, which I think is super, super, super. And this bill passed House Education, but it was a party line vote, and Barbara Freiberg joined the Democrats, which is, I guess, her home team.
Yes, she's definitely her home team. I testified very passionately about this bill because I get tired of the Freibergs, and the Hilferdys, and some of the Democrats as well, from talking about how this is not occurring in Louisiana. Why do you need to get this information about diversity, equity, and inclusion and critical race theory and all these things? And why do you need to seek information about how much money is being spent on these programs? I don't have any evidence or any reason to believe that any of this is even occurring here. So when I testified, I specifically made reference to the Monroe teacher manual that's in the Monroe City School District, and what they are teaching from that manual about structural racism and the fact that racism and misogyny and all these things are the current status quo, and that our country is basically structurally racist. Our founding documents are based in racism. I mean, this is unbelievable that they would be teaching these things in our school. And I said, so it is occurring here. I haven't done an exhaustive study across the state to see where else it's happening, but I know it's happening there. And the last time I checked, Monroe is within the state of Louisiana. So it is occurring. And I'm asking this committee to exercise your oversight committee and the legislature to exercise your oversight committee, find out what's going on, what's being spent on these programs, and what exactly is being taught. And it's a very good bill, HB 904, that the freshman Representative Chenevert is bringing. I can tell you right now, Danielle, that there is going to be resistance among some rhinos and a lot of Democrats on the House floor on this if we do not put major pressure on them and let them know exactly where we stand on this very important bill.
All right. Well, we need to get the pressure out then. Maybe we need this to be another scorecard vote, Chris.
I think we do. I think it needs to be a scorecard vote. And I hope everybody who listens to this podcast reaches out to their legislator and tells them, you better vote yes on the House floor on HB 904, because our kids are not going to be taught to hate each other, to hate their country, and to hate the Constitution. And we have a right to know how our taxpayer dollars are being spent and what is being taught to our children.
Amen. All right. Chris, do we have a call to action up on that one? I can't remember. We may need to get that up this evening.
Yeah, HB 904. HB 904, we need to get a call to action up if it's not already up.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Last up on Monday is in the Senate. It's subject to call, and it is SB 482 by Senator Cloud. This is her bill about public records request. We had her on the show last week, I think, or maybe the week before. Chris, I know you've been in touch with her to get this bill in a good place, in an acceptable place that is aligned with some court precedent.
Yeah, she's trying to draw a fine balance between the public's right to know, which is so important in a government that is representative of the people, and on the other hand, the freedom for government officials to deliberate with some degree of candor and openness with each other without having to worry about whether or not every single thing they say or put in writing is on the front page of a newspaper. And so that is the line she's trying to draw. The U.S. Supreme Court has recognized the deliberative process exception, so it's certainly not unconstitutional or wouldn't be declared unconstitutional what Senator Cloud is trying to do here. She's simply trying to create some degree of protection for government officials so that they can deliberate candidly about public policy. And I understand that, and I respect that. I still think her bill is too broad, and I still think that there should be I think it should be further narrowed down. For instance, I don't believe that just because a document was created before a final decision was made, that it should be shielded from public view. The U.S. Supreme Court has said if a document is consistent with and helps support the basis for a final policy decision, then that should be subject to public disclosure. And so that needs to be clarified within her bill and other similar things. So I'm working with her to make sure that these things are put in there to make sure. And more broadly, Danielle, what I asked her to do, I said, Senator Cloud, just put yourself in the position of a citizen who is trying to seek records from a governor that we cannot stand, from a governor that we believe is doing bad things to harm Louisiana citizens. And we want to know what they're up to and what they're doing. What kind of a public records law would you want to have in place if you were the one seeking the records? And never lose sight of that, because this law is going to exist long after Governor Landry is gone. And we never know who's coming next or who may be there 10 years from now. Yet this law will still be applicable. So please think about that when you're crafting your final legislation. And that was the advice that I gave her.
Well, it's wise advice. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Absolutely. So
We'll all have to live
hopefully,
with it.
yeah, and hopefully we'll end up with a good product in the end. And I think I do believe that she's acting in good faith.
Yeah, I do think so too. All right, Chris, moving on to Tuesday, we have in Senate Judiciary A 2 bills that we have followed that have finally made their way over to the Senate for a hearing. They are HB 25 by Representative Danny McCormick and HB 87 by Representative Michael Echols, both related to emergency use vaccines, COVID vaccines. Remind our listeners what they're trying to do.
HB 25, no liability on any business because they refuse to mandate an emergency use authorized vaccine or an experimental vaccine. If a business doesn't mandate it, they can get in no trouble in any way, shape, or form, either in the issuing of business licenses or permits, no retaliatory action on any business that refuses to mandate an experimental vaccine. Very good bill, should get through, and it absolutely needs to. And then HB 87, as you mentioned, Danielle, and this would prohibit any mandating of any vaccine from any public or private employer, with substantial penalties in place to go against any employer who violates the law. So no more mandating on the part of any employer of the COVID shot in Louisiana. I wish this was broader. I wish it applied to all experimental vaccines, and it should. And I wish individual citizens who were discriminated against were able to file personal private lawsuits to vindicate their rights. But that's not where we are at this point. It's still a decent bill, and I certainly hope that it passes. I'm so sick of even the thought that anybody would ever be able to mandate this vaccine on Louisiana citizens or employees ever again.
Yeah, or any, as you said, Chris, or any. So I know I was asking you this afternoon, is there any hope that this can get turned around? Can it get broadened? And you said that probably not this session. The outlook is not too good to get this particular bill broadened, but perhaps Representative Echols already has his sights on amending it next session.
Yeah, maybe next session. I know they tried in the House to broaden it to any experimental vaccines, but that didn't work. I'm going to go back and look when this is over with. I'm going to go back and I'm going to find out item by item, bill by bill, which of these bills lobby opposed and why. Because lobby is the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry is extending itself and poking its head in legislation that extends far beyond simple business legislation that's good or bad for businesses. They're getting involved in health legislation, in whether or not the people can mandate vaccines, and whether or not citizens should be able to sue someone who violates their rights. I'm sorry, lobby, but just because legislation may allow a citizen to sue somebody when their rights are trampled does not make it a bad bill. And if you're going to oppose every piece of legislation just because it creates a right for a citizen to sue somebody if they get screwed over and they are harmed, that makes you a not a very good organization across the board, and that needs to stop. And you need to start looking a little more closely at these bills instead of just opposing them because they allow a citizen to file a lawsuit if the law is violated. I don't like that one bit.
No. And I guess, my perspective would be that they're not, it's not even, I think the how is pretty transparent, or the why rather is, excuse me, pretty transparent. It's because they want to defend the rights of big corporates to squash the rights of citizens. And that's what they're doing. I mean, that's what they're lobbying for. They're not lobbying they're not lobbying for the best interests even of the employers. If you take a look at it, they're really not.
They're really
It's all
not.
about corporate interests.
Absolutely. And we're gonna take a very close and deep dive into this.
All right. Next up, House Criminal Justice. This past week, there were several abortion bills that were brought to House Criminal Justice. Most of them got pushed to this week. One, as we mentioned already, was defeated. That was the bill by Mandy Landry. But the four others remain and will be heard on Tuesday. They're HB 56 and 63 by Representative Newell, HB 164 by Representative Boyd, and HB 293 by Freeman. And Chris, all of these are just chipping away at the rights of the unborn.
That's exactly right. All of these bills either redefine abortion, just create a new definition for abortion, or create exceptions that allow abortion. In any case, that you're exactly right, Danielle. They are chipping away, weakening the pro-life protections in Louisiana, protection of the unborn. And of course, we oppose these bills, and we hope that they meet the same fate that they met last year, which is to die in a committee.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will, remain vigilant because they just keep on coming back. But
And it's the same authors.
yeah, and I really hope that there's a day coming, Chris, when these women see the light and understand what it is they've been trying to do all this time. I do believe that there's still room for a turnaround for each one of these ladies to see what it is that they're really trying to do. Because I do think I'm hopeful that they just can't quite understand the implications of what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And they're not all dumb.
It's just too heinous. No.
Yeah. And they're not all dumb.
No.
Some of them are smart, but whether they're dupes or whether they're actually prime movers, it doesn't make the legislation any better. And you're right, Danielle. Hope springs eternal, and there can be a turnaround. There can be conversions. One thing I can tell you for sure is that I'm pretty sure Debbie Melvin will be right down there on the front lines fighting against this.
Yeah, she will. She will. What a champion. Go get him, Debbie. All right. Next up, House and Governmental Affairs. Also Tuesday. This bill we have mentioned before. It's House Bill 111 by Representative Mike Bam. And it is a proposed constitutional amendment that would limit the governor's terms.
Yeah, this would, very simple. Right now, the governor basically cannot serve more than 2 consecutive terms. So if a governor serves a term or serves 2 terms and then goes away for a while, he could come back and run again. But right now, this constitutional amendment, if it passes, would say that the governor can have no more than 2 terms total, no matter when they occur. 2 terms, that's it. And I think that's good, because I don't think if a governor can't get done what he needs to get done in 2 terms, then I'm sorry, it's time for him to go. There's no reason to serve more than 8 years total as governor of the state of Louisiana. I think it's a good bill, and I hope it gets to the people.
Yeah, I hope so too. There are enough bright, capable people in this state. We can self-govern, and we don't need the same person ruling as an imperial governor in perpetuity. with short breaks.
Uh,
Guess that's not in perpetuity with with short
well,
breaks, but behind
no.
the scenes it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is basically in perpetuity with short breaks. That's exactly right. That's well put. And we don't need it. And I think that it's just cathartic for a democratic republic to limit the power, both temporally and substantively, that our leaders have, to limit their tenures and limit their power.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Tuesday, up for House floor debate are two bills that we have been following pretty closely. First one is House Bill 975 by Representative Dodie Horton. This one has been a long time coming, and it is basically saying that parents have to know and have to consent to any medical treatment that their kid gets.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Crazy that this has to be a bill.
It's a little crazy that this has to be a bill in the state of Louisiana that establishes that parents have to provide permission before their kids can undergo any kind of medical procedure. But as I said before, Paige Lowry demonstrated to me and showed me exactly where the law is that shows that right now that's exactly what can happen. A kid can go into a healthcare clinic or facility or hospital and get treatment if they simply complain that they think they may have a problem. This has to go. This bill will essentially repeal that law and provide that no child, no minor can get any kind of health care provision at any time except an emergency situation if they do not have the written consent of their parents. And it's very, very important that this be in place. And it passed out of this passed out of, was it criminal justice or was it the House welfare?
I think it might have been health and welfare.
Yeah, House welfare. And so we'll be going on to the House floor. And this is one of those bills also, Danielle, where I'm going to be looking out to see where the rhinos are and what they say, and most importantly, how they vote.
Absolutely. We're going to put out a call to action on that, or rather a call notice to the legislators saying, listen up, folks, we're paying attention. You better vote the right way. You better vote for parental rights. You better vote for what's in the best interest of children, which is for their parents to be involved in their medical treatment.
And there should be absolutely no controversy about whether or not in a legislature that's dominated 2/3 by Republicans, that there would be any issue, any controversy, or any doubt about whether a bill like this is going to pass. There should be none. And I don't care how many people sit up there and try to talk about all the different reasons or why. Oh, but what if this happens and the kid doesn't have time to get consent? And what if this creates more paperwork for the doctors? And this, I don't care what it does. We have a law that needs to be in place, that parents have a right to know and to give their informed consent before you engage in any medical action regarding their minor children. It's straightforward, and it should not even be controversial. And I don't care what the excuses are that people come up with to oppose this. House Bill 975 has to pass.
You have mentioned before, Chris, that this will not have an impact on emergency surgeries. Obviously, if someone comes in with a gash or a broken limb, they can be treated. I think really you can look at this as a bill that's going to support doctors' ability to uphold the Hippocratic Oath, because they will not be doing harm. They will actually be helping children.
Absolutely. I love the way you put that.
And in the short run. Okay, next up, House Bill 800 by Representative Beaulieu. And this is the, let's see, what am I supposed to, okay, the convention to amend the state constitution. Chris, do you see, I don't really see there being any problems with this.
I don't see there being any problems with it at this point.
Pass, right?
Yeah, I don't see there being any problems with it at this point, because there are restrictions on what issues can be covered, what can be done, and Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. Article 1, which includes the preamble of rights, None of those can be messed with. None of the structural provisions regarding the structure of our government, the separation of powers, the fundamental rights of the citizens, none of that can be messed with. And that is in this legislation prohibiting any discussion about those fundamental provisions in our Constitution. They just cannot go there, period. And they shouldn't ever go there. But you never know when you might have some bright-eyed rhino or Democrat that may want to go in and try to mess with the fundamental freedoms in our Constitution. But Boyer was smart enough to include an amendment which prohibits that from happening. The way this is being postured, Danielle, they're going to be going in and basically extracting from our Constitution certain provisions and certain laws that really should be in statutory law, not in the Constitution. Our Constitution is supposed to be a broad governing document, a roadmap within which we should operate that outlines basic structural parameters of our government. We're not supposed to be putting every law in the Constitution, or even most of them. The vast majority of the laws that we pass should be passed statutorily by our legislature and not jammed into the Constitution. And I think that's what this convention is largely going to be about. And I think it's important for that reason.
Yeah, I saw on Governor Landry's Twitter this week that the Louisiana Constitution, the Louisiana State Constitution, is 17 times thicker than the United States Constitution. So I think that's the point he's trying to make. It's time to slim it down, simplify, and put the laws where they belong. Also, Chris, want to mention it's going to be a very interesting time if the timeline that's laid out in this bill is the timeline that they move forward with, because it would be during the end of this session. So I don't know if they're going to try and jam everything through before May 20th when this is set to start, or if that date has changed. But last time I looked, a May 20th start with a goal to end the same day as the legislature breaks for the year would be a pretty tight schedule, especially if you're layering on top of that the regular bills that still need to get through. So we may be in for a doozy.
I don't see how this necessarily is going to happen or how it's going to go down, but we will absolutely be covering it, reporting it, and making sure that we're moving forward to represent Louisiana citizens and make sure that whatever is done with their best interests at heart. And that's where we are on all of this.
Yeah. A couple more bills. Now moving on to Wednesday. We'll start out with House Criminal Justice. This is a super important bill, Senate Bill 420 by Senator Valerie Hodges, and it's creating the crime of election fraud or forgery.
Yeah, if you go in and you lie about who you are when you're registering to vote, then you can be criminally prosecuted for fraud and forgery, and you can do a number of years in prison and pay big fines for that. So don't go in and try to register to vote under false pretenses by lying about who you are, or you could get in big trouble for it. I think this bill is very, very timely, Danielle, in light of the current political climate of our state and our country.
Yeah, it is. And hopefully there will be several other bills that pass alongside of it that will strengthen it and help straighten out our elections even more. Two other bills that are coming that are aiming to try and straighten out our elections a little more are being brought in House and Governmental Affairs also on Wednesday. They are SB 155 and 218 by Senator Klein Peter, and they are basically restricting who can help you with your mail-in ballot and who can help you inside of the voting booth.
That's exactly right. And this bill basically is going to the purpose of the bill is to limit the access of these radical leftist third-party groups from going in and basically ballot harvesting from vulnerable citizens and trying to pressure them and coerce them to vote for who they want them to vote for. So this is going to severely restrict their ability to do that. Only family members primarily are going to be able to assist vulnerable relatives in their capacity to vote. You're not going to be able to have these third-party leftist groups going in and preying upon large groups of vulnerable voters to get them to do what they want to do and vote how they want to vote. No. And you're right, whether it's absentee or whether it's in person at the polls, Klein Peter is very much on to something here. And I think he's going to do these bills will go a long way in protecting vulnerable voters from leftist vultures.
Yeah. So we'll see how those shake out on Wednesday. And also up in House and Governmental Affairs is Senate Bill 388 by Senator Valerie Hodges. She has been bringing the heat this session. It is this bill is the one that creates the crime of unlawful entry or unlawful re-entry by an illegal alien into the state. So we can boot them out, Chris?
Absolutely. You come in illegally or you come back in illegally, you can be booted out, and you can also pay some pretty big fines for doing this. So this allows expeditious removal and coordination with federal officials to get these people out of our country who are coming here illegally.
Yeah. It's just such a tragedy. You know, you think about this bill and you think about Senator Kathy's SB 306 and how, you know, there are many women, children, and possibly others being trafficked as a result of the state of our border. And I just wonder, Chris, how this is all going to work out together, you know, because we know that there are people here who are illegally here, lots and lots of them. And we know that a great number, a large percentage of the children that are coming in are being trafficked. So I guess, I mean, this bill will do a lot to hopefully protect children from perpetrators who are here illegally. And I hope that there are some provisions coming that will also strengthen our ability to understand where those kids are going and who's taking care of them or who is not taking care of them. Because the number of children that are crossing our border is just staggering and gut-wrenching. And I don't know how a state really addresses that.
Yeah.
But
You're exactly right.
It's just such a big issue.
It's a massive issue, and really, it's very significantly a federal issue. These issues should be being addressed at our border, at the border of our country, and it is just so unfortunate the extent to which the Biden administration has completely betrayed us, completely failed us in such as you said, a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking way when it comes to protecting children who are being trafficked across our border. Danielle, someone's told me the other day that this is like the amount of money these people make is in the billions of dollars from doing this worldwide. I'm like, think about that. Billions and billions of dollars being made permanently damaging children. It's enough to to say that it's heartbreaking is just, there's no way to describe it. But I know that it's an issue that absolutely begs for justice.
Yeah. And I think our federal government, to your point, Chris, is definitely going to be in the crosshairs because there have been whistleblowers, whistleblower after whistleblower, exposing the fact that it's not that our federal government has let us down. It is that this is the plan, that they are actively doing this, actively facilitating it. And it's just staggering.
It makes it even more, and honestly makes it even more heartbreaking. Yeah. If it's intentional.
Yeah. And the worst kind of betrayal you can possibly imagine. It's a betrayal of our core values. It's a betrayal of our founders. It's a betrayal of our foundations, a betrayal of our Creator.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, God, remember, just remember there's a great passage in the Bible, Danielle, that says, for those in positions of power, a rigorous scrutiny impends. So you can expect to be scrutinized if you have great power and you're misusing that power. A rigorous scrutiny impends upon you. And remember, we do serve a God of justice, and he will impose his justice. I believe it.
He will. Yeah. And another scripture that I'll add to yours is that when the enemy comes in like a flood, and there certainly is a flood at our southern border, the the Lord the Lord our God raises up a standard against him. And I think we've said it here before, but and someone recently said it to me, and it just was very moving to me. We are the standard. We are meant to be the standard that's raised up against the evil that's coming in.
We are the
So,
standard.
yeah. All right. Just a couple bills more. Actually, only two. Both are going to be in the Senate on Wednesday. The first one up is in Senate Commerce. It's Senate Bill 357 by Representative Beryl Amade. What a warrior. And she is working again this session to prohibit CBDC as an acceptable currency for a deposit in a bank account.
And it's so important to fight back against the surveillance state that President Biden is pushing for through the central bank digital currency, where they can surveil and track and punish us for our economic transactions. Absolutely nefarious and alarming. And Representative Amade's bill would simply prohibit central bank digital currency from being included in the definition of a deposit account in any bank in the state of Louisiana. Very important piece of legislation. This got through, Danielle, last year handily, and was vetoed by Governor Edwards. And of course, we didn't have the will to override that veto in the legislative session in the House. Couldn't get it out of the House in the veto override session, which I thought was quite sad. I hope we don't. I hope we don't have to worry about that this year.
No, I'm not worried about that this year. The governor's got much bigger fish to fry, and he is, I think, going to be trying to get some really good things done. So, next up is Senate Education. This is a bill that is to be confirmed. We're not 100% sure if it'll be heard in Senate Education this week, but if it is, it will be Wednesday. Senate Bill 47 by Representative Kathy Edmonston, and it is the bill around vaccine exemption notices that my representative Jessica Domingue put an amendment on that completely mangled it and changed the law and raised the ire of many of her constituents, many people around the state. And I think even at the national level, people were weighing in on how horrible and egregious that amendment was. Remind us what the amendment would do, Chris.
The amendment basically says if you want your kid to be able to go to school, if he's not vaccinated, that's fine. You made a parental decision not to get your kid vaccinated, not in his best interest. Yeah, you have a right to do that as a parent. But guess what? Before he gets to go to school, you better go to the doctor and get the doctor to sign off on it and get the doctor's permission. Otherwise, you don't get to go to school. Let me tell you, that was Domain's amendment. And let me tell you, parents have been outraged by this. I've never seen the kind of backlash. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments on social media and elsewhere saying, who do you think you are? We're the parents. This is our kid. If we don't want to get our kid vaccinated, if he has natural immunity, or we make a decision that it's not in his best interest to get, or her best interest to get vaccinated, that's our decision. And if we don't want to go by the doctor's office to get him to sign off on it before we go to school, that's also our business. So get the doctor out from between me and my kids. And that's what she would have done. That's what it does.
And Chris, well, I'll just add to that, right? So that is, it did pass. And I'll just add to that, because if I'm not mistaken, the bill that Representative Amity brought that would have prohibited healthcare providers from incentivizing physicians to give the vaccine failed. Now, let's just piece this together. We all lived through COVID. Who wanted you to get the vaccine? Well, your doctor wanted you to get the vaccine because they were getting money from it. Your employer wanted you to get the vaccine because they were being threatened by their insurance companies or because they were afraid of the Biden administration. So you don't want to get the vaccine. All these people want you to have the stupid vaccine. And now the way that you can get around getting the vaccine is to go to the doctor who wants you to get the vaccine because he's getting paid to give you the vaccine. Am I missing
That's
something?
exactly right. So you go to the doctor and get him to sign off on it. So when you go in there, you're going to have your doctor telling you all the reasons why you need to get the vaccine. It's none of your damn business. Leave us alone.
It's none of your business. It's none of your business. And Chris, didn't that bill by Representative Amity fail last week?
Yes.
And wasn't Jessica Domingue one of the people who voted against it?
But yeah, I'm 99% sure.
I'm going to double check. Let me just check because I don't want to be on the record saying the wrong thing, but I am fairly sure that is the case.
But while you're looking for that, I just want to tell you that it's enraging that people would sit around and think, oh yeah, let people go to the doctor, let the parents go to the doctor, so the doctor who wants them to get vaccinated because they make money off of it can go ahead and sign off and give them permission to go to school. Absolutely not. Absolute garbage. Just garbage.
She voted against it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that she did. Yeah, and the bill was HB 958. If anybody wants to look it up, and all it would have done, Danielle, would prohibit financial incentives for healthcare providers to administer vaccines. And you remember all the pressure from all the different sources during COVID: get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated. And you know these health insurers were giving these doctors financial incentives to the more vaccines, the better. This was a good bill, 958. I'm so glad that you reminded our listeners that we had the rhinos and some Dems defeat that bill, 958.
Yeah, so if this stands as is, which we do believe that the amendment will get stripped out in Senate Education, I'm very hopeful for that. You have some reasonable expectation that will be the case. But let's say the Domingue amendment stands. So you have to go to the doctor. You have to get the doctor to tell you that it's okay not to vaccinate your kid. But if you don't vaccinate your kid and this other bill passes that Representative Amity brought, your kid can't get discriminated against. None of it makes sense. None of it makes sense. You need the doctor who's getting paid for you to vaccinate telling you that you must vaccinate. And then you can't sue. You can't sue if someone discriminates against you. I guess the kids are protected so far. It seems like that bill is going to pass. But anyway, all this to say, it is a big tangled mess as it currently stands, although I do have some faith that Senate Education will right the ship on this one and it will be a lot more straightforward. But I'm still pretty salty that those two bills, the anti-discrimination bill and the incentives bill, got killed by people who are bowing to big corporates who stand to gain from those bills.
Yeah, and Danielle, keep in mind that
from the bills failing, rather.
Yeah. We're gonna look back at the end of the session and see what legislation actually is on the books that prohibits any kind of discrimination against Louisiana citizens for refusing vaccines. I'm going to look at it when it's all said and done. They seem to be sort of trying to have their cake and sort of eat it too, and kind of walk down the middle road and try to choose a little here, take a little here, but they're not, with very few exceptions, they're not really being 100% loyal to the citizens of this state. They're
No, they're
trying to
not.
have their
They're
cake
not.
and eat it too often.
Well, I'm not going to stand for it. I know you're not going to stand for it, and we're not going to let anybody forget what has happened. Um, but Chris, look, we wrapped up. We're doing better than we have been the last couple weeks. It's 10:30 instead of 11:30 or 12, so that's big improvement.
Well, I guess I might even have time for one adult beverage before I go and hit the hay and sleep well tonight, thinking about all of the great things I'm going to do tomorrow. Getting some of this good legislation on the floor. I'm excited about some of the votes coming up, Danielle. And you know what I'm so excited about? I'm excited about paying really, really close attention to how our Republicans are voting on this critical legislation. You know why? Because in our wrap up session and our big wrap up session at the end of the session episode, I am going to be so excited to be able to really go through all of this and let our listeners know exactly how our Republicans and Democrats, for that matter, voted on this critical legislation, on all of it, because we're going to use that to create our scorecards, and we're going to be using that as the information that we send out to constituents across the state. So the people who vote for these folks are going to know exactly what they did for good and for bad.
Yeah. And, we get kind of worked up about some of these bills. I know I do. I know you do, Chris. I know you do. I get worked up about some of them. You get worked up about some of them. But most of them we're pretty pleased with, pretty excited to see these get passed, and just feel like we're making great progress in the state. One bill, maybe, Chris, that we can mention is Senate Bill 485 by Senator Valerie Hodges. She was meant to bring this as the alternative to Representative Cruz's HB 714, the transactional gold and silver bill. And she does not feel like she has the support to get that done this session, which is a huge, huge disappointment to us. We learned that this afternoon. So I don't know. Maybe we should.
The bankers.
Should we? Yeah, it's because of the bankers. Is there anything you think we can do to get a groundswell of support for that, Chris? Is there? It's not too late. Maybe we can. Maybe we fire up a call to action and get people to send a note to their legislators, at least their senators, saying, "We want to see this. Get off of your butt and vote." And show some support for this. I don't know.
I think a call to action on SB 485 absolutely cannot hurt. And I would absolutely go along with that, and I go along with a call to action on HB 904, Chenevire's DEI bill. I think those are two important bills, and I don't want to give up on 485. I think it's too important.
Me either. It is too important, and we have so much to gain as a state by first mover advantage. And if we put ourselves in this position of waiting until next year, someone else will have moved into that spot. Someone else will have gained all the rights to industry that we could have had.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's exactly how I feel about it. But I do think we need to continue pushing 485 and get as many calls to action out as we can. And because that's really what it comes down to, Danielle. It comes down to relentless grassroots advocacy. There's just no substitute for it. And I know that good legislators truly appreciate it. They absolutely appreciate all of our efforts, and it makes them realize that they're not fighting alone. And it's very emboldening and gives them a lot of courage, I believe. And they've said as much. It's hard. It's a hard fight for them down there. For good legislators to do the right thing in that environment there is very difficult, Danielle. It's not an easy place to maintain your integrity.
No, it's absolutely not. But what I love, Chris, is that we are seeing that there are quite a number of people who recognize that they were put there by the people to represent the people, and they are doing that work. And so I hope that we will see those numbers grow. I hope we'll see the courage grow, And I think we will see it. We will see it. Like you often remind us, the carrot and the stick. So we have lots of carrots, but we can also bring the stick if we need to.
Absolutely, and we are, and we've seen significant results and success. And I'm very optimistic about many things that I see at the legislature, and I always continue to believe that most of them really do want to do the right thing, and it's not malice that makes them not do the right thing. Really, I think it's weakness. And at times a lack of courage because they don't feel like they have support. And that's what we're here for, to make sure they understand that they have an army behind them who will cover them, help them, and defend them. And we're seeing by and large, as you indicated, Danielle, good results for the most part. But we're here to provide unapologetic protection of Louisiana citizens across the board, across the state. Citizens, the Constitution, and most importantly, God. Those are our three loyalties. And we are not going to apologize for those loyalties ever.
Nope, we're not going to. And I think we're getting bolder and louder and stronger every day, Chris.
Oh, I do too. And I believe that if we continue to do that, Danielle, there will be absolutely no stopping us. And you know what we're going to do if we continue to move forward each day with courage and relentlessness and God's grace and keeping our eyes on Him? We're going to take another grand step every single day to preserve the state of freedom in the great state of Louisiana.
Amen. Yes, we will, Chris. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.